What if the land passed down through your family was put on the auction block without your consent? That's what a black family faced when their HOA tried to sell their property, treating heritage like a line item for profit. Gasps erupted when the family struck back. Imagine this: a fence stretching across a quiet suburban street, white paint peeling in the sun, its lines meant to mark yards but carrying the weight of division. On one side rests a family's inheritance, land soaked with memory and survival. On the other, a boardroom where papers are stacked like weapons, waiting for the next strike. The neighborhood hums with routine. Sprinklers tick. Mailboxes clang. Dogs bark in the distance. Yet in the HOA office, the shuffle of documents and the hum of printers reveal a different rhythm, one of control wrapped in policy. Karen, the HOA president, studies the rows of houses from her window. Her voice is smooth but sharp at its edges. Karen says, "Rules keep order. Without them, we lose everything." The words hang in the air like a warning shot. At the fence, Marcus runs his hand over the rough wood, adjusting a loose board. His voice carries the weight of years worked into calloused palms. Marcus replies, "This land stood before your rules, and it'll stand after them." From behind curtains, neighbors watch. A child's face pressed against the glass. A man lowering his blinds quickly. No one speaks. Silence becomes the loudest character, thick, unbroken, complicit. The soil beneath their feet carries a longer story than any HOA ledger. In flashes of memory, sepia photographs appear. Ancestors standing firm against banks, against policies designed to erase them. A grandfather bent over crops, whispering to his son, "Never let them take it." Now Marcus breathes the same promise into the present. His wife, Althea, tends the garden blooming with flowers her grandmother planted decades before. Every corner of the property is a piece of their family quilt, sewn from resilience and scarred by survival. Althea kneels to pull weeds, pausing to look across the street. Althea says, "They see dirt. We see memory. They'll never understand that." Their children play by the oak tree that shaded elders during Sunday gatherings. The tree itself feels like a witness, branches heavy with unspoken stories. But in the mailbox rests a new kind of shadow. Folded envelopes stamped official, threats hidden beneath polite lettering. At first, the HOA's face is disguised by courtesy. Notes typed in tidy script, reminders about standards. Smiles. At block meetings, practiced handshakes. But behind the curtain, a machine grinds forward. Its gears are fines, its power lies in rules twisted like knives. Karen leans across the table at a board meeting, papers shuffling like cards dealt in a game already rigged. Karen says, "We enforce equally, no exceptions." A board member smirks, tapping a pen against the desk. Board member replies, "Equal. On paper. Selective in practice." Laughter drips into the room like poison. The family receives notice after notice. Grass too tall, mailbox out of compliance, fence not painted to code. Each complaint small enough to seem petty, yet sharp enough to bleed. Marcus folds another letter, tossing it onto the kitchen table where a stack already grows. Marcus says, "It's never about the mailbox. It's about us." Across the neighborhood, blinds twitch. On porches, neighbors exchange whispers. Maybe they should just follow the rules. Their words, dressed in civility, conceal the same prejudice written in the fine print. The crowd becomes a silent accomplice. At block parties, conversations falter when Marcus and Althea arrive. In grocery aisles, nods replace greetings. At night, whispers drift over fences like smoke. One evening, Marcus leans on the fence, staring at his neighbor who waters his lawn in calculated silence. Marcus says, "You see what they're doing? Why won't you speak up?" The neighbor grips the hose tighter, eyes darting to the other houses. Neighbor replies, "It's not my fight. I've got a mortgage to think about." The water keeps running. soaking into soil that doesn't belong to him. Silence presses heavier than words, filling the space between houses until even the air feels hostile. And then, it happens at the fence line itself. An HOA agent approaches, clipboard tapping against his palm, voice clipped with authority. Agent says, "Your yard's in violation. Rules don't bend for anyone." Marcus lifts his chin, his eyes sharp. Marcus replies, "Then maybe your rules are broken." The tension sparks like flint striking steel. Curtains shift again. A phone rises in a neighbor's hand, recording quietly, but the footage never leaves their device. Not yet. The fence creaks in the evening wind, carrying the weight of words unspoken. What was once just wood now stands as a stage dividing more than property. On one side, a family holding their ground. On the other, a system cloaked in regulations. Between them, a silence so vast it feels like a canyon. And in that silence the war begins, without declaration, without witnesses willing to speak. Only paper, whispers, and the uneasy groan of a fence that divides far more than yards. The letters arrive like weapons. At first one, then another, then a storm. Each envelope carries a sterile return address. But inside, the words are sharpened, to cut. Violation notice. Failure to comply. Additional fine assessed. Every line is dressed in the language of order, but every sentence lands like a blow. Marcus stands at the mailbox with another letter in his hand, jaw tight. He doesn't open it immediately. He already knows what's inside. Althea watches. From the porch, arms crossed against her chest. Althea says, "How many is that this week?" Marcus replies, 4, and the week's not done yet. Inside, the table is covered with stacks of paper. Some are folded neatly, some torn in. Frustration. The children look at them, the way other kids look at warning signs. Even they understand the weight of paper. Flashbacks ripple through Marcus's mind. His grandfather in the 1960s, sitting at a banker's desk, hearing words wrapped in false politeness. "We regret to inform you the loan terms have changed." His uncle in the 1980s, watching bulldozers level land the family once rented but could never buy, contracts written to exclude. The stories of theft stretch back like shadows, and Marcus feels them pressing on his chest. The past isn't distant. It's alive in these envelopes. Marcus spreads them out across the table, his finger tracing the fines. Marcus says, "Same tactic, different century." Althea kneels beside him, sliding one letter aside. Althea says, "They think if they bury us under paper, we'll suffocate. But we've carried heavier than this. Still, the weight grows." Notices for improper fence paint. Notices for unapproved mailbox style. A fine for a flower bed too close to the sidewalk. Every detail weaponized. The fence that once symbolized history now feels like a cage. The family inside staring out at neighbors who pretend not to see. The neighbors keep their silence. Some whisper behind blinds. Why don't they just follow the rules? Others mutter in driveways. Maybe they shouldn't even be here. Silence mixes with prejudice until it's impossible to tell one from the other. One afternoon, Marcus confronts another letter carrier of fines, a man with a clipboard, sunglasses reflecting back Marcus's own face. Marcus says, "Do you ever think about what you're doing?" The agent shrugs. Agent replies, "I just enforce the rules. Nothing personal." But it feels personal. Every word on paper feels personal. The story spills online. One evening, Marcus catches 2 HOA agents stepping beyond the fence, measuring without permission, snapping photos. He doesn't shout at them this time. He lifts his phone instead. The camera records their trespass. The agents notice too late. Their expressions caught. Annoyance, guilt, arrogance, all in a single frame. The video is posted. A neighbor whispers it into a community group. Then it spreads wider. Hashtags form. Comments flood in. Outsiders see what locals ignored. On the screen of Marcus's phone, strangers type what neighbors never said aloud. Unbelievable abuse. Stand strong, we're with you. HOA gone wild. The digital crowd roars while the physical crowd stays quiet. Neighbors continue, mowing lawns, pulling trash cans, averting eyes. The contrast is suffocating. At the grocery store, a woman approaches Althea in hushed tones. Neighbor whispers, "I saw the video, but I can't say anything. I've got kids in this school." Althea replies, "And you think ours don't?" The silence feels sharper now, exposed by the echo of online noise. Meanwhile, the HOA tightens its grip. The board holds a meeting behind closed doors, papers spread across tables like battle maps. Karen stands at the head, tapping her pen against a contract. Karen says, "We've given them warnings. We've assessed fines. Next step is legal action." Board member replies, "We could seize the property, sell it off." Another laughs. "Turn their land into profit? The market's hot. Developers would eat it up." The room hums with approval, greed cloaked in procedure. What the family suspects soon becomes undeniable. The HOA is plotting not just to fine them, but to strip the land itself. Their legacy, their inheritance, gone in. A transaction disguised as community improvement. Marcus sits at the kitchen table, head in his hands as Althea reads the latest notice aloud. Althea says, "Failure to comply will result in property seizure proceedings." Her voice trembles, then hardens. Althea says, "They want the land." That's all it ever was. The children listen quietly, too young to grasp the legal jargon but old enough to feel the fear. The crowd shifts uneasily. The viral video lingers in memory, and some neighbors no longer look away as easily. They nod awkwardly at the family, some even whispering apologies. Yet no one raises a public voice. The HOA's power is still too sharp. At night, Marcus overhears a neighbor mutter near the fence. Neighbor whispers, "Maybe they'll win. Maybe it's about time." But the whisper vanishes into the dark, fragile as smoke. The family keeps fighting. Marcus gathers letters, fines, all the evidence of harassment, storing them in boxes. Each paper feels like an attack, but together they start to resemble a shield. One late evening, Althea discovers something buried in the records, an unpaid tax bill belonging not to them, but to the HOA itself. A building listed under the association's name, neglected, vulnerable. She holds the paper as though it's more than ink. It's a weapon turned backward. Althea says, "They've left themselves exposed." Marcus looks at the page, a slow fire rising in his chest. Marcus replies, "The same paper they use against us, we'll use against them." The silence of the crowd, the arrogance of the HOA, the mountain of paper stacked against the family, all of it tilts suddenly, as if the balance of power has shifted a single degree. It's not enough to win, not yet, but it's enough to hope. The war that began with offense and whispers now holds its first real chance of reversal. And in that fragile silence, the storm prepares to break. The storm of notices does not ease. Day by day, the mailbox spits out more paper, each letter folded like a threat. Yet this time, the family no longer throws them into piles of despair. They catalog them, box them, file them. What once buried them now becomes their record of battle. Marcus spreads the papers across the kitchen table like a general laying out maps. Every fine, every violation, every signature becomes a piece of the puzzle. Marcus says, "They wanted a paper war. Let's give them one." Althea sits across from him, the glow of her laptop lighting her determined face. Althea replies, "Every word they wrote, every dollar they claimed, it's all evidence. We'll turn their weapons against them." The children peer in from the hallway, whispering about the war table. Even in their innocence, they sense the shift. The family no longer bends under the weight of paper. They are sharpening it, but the HOA is not slowing. Their meetings grow more aggressive, their language colder. Inside the boardroom, Karen's voice rises above the others. Karen says, "If they won't yield, we escalate. We have the authority." A board member laughs softly, adding fuel. Board member replies, "And soon we'll have the land." They lean over blueprints of future developments, glossy sketches of new buildings where the family's home now stands. The greed is no longer whispered. It is charted in ink. Outside, the neighborhood holds its breath. Some residents feel guilt gnawing at them, but fear of retaliation keeps their mouths shut. A man mowing his lawn pauses, hearing Marcus arguing with an HOA agent, but he keeps pushing his mower forward, pretending not to notice. A woman closes her blinds when she sees Althea holding yet another notice in her trembling hands. Silence is not neutral. It is a choice. Then comes the moment that breaks that silence in ways no one expects. Marcus receives another visit from clipboard-carrying agents, but this time, instead of confronting them with words, he films them again. The agents' voices are sharper now, emboldened by authority. Agent says, "You're in violation of multiple codes. Non-compliance will result in forfeiture." Marcus holds the camera steady, his voice low. Marcus replies, "Say it again. Say it louder." They realize too late that their arrogance is being recorded. One agent curses under his breath. The footage captures it all. Within hours, the video spreads online, first in neighborhood groups, then across social platforms. Millions of strangers witness the harassment in real time. Comments pour in like, "A flood. This is theft. Stand strong. We're with you. Expose every one of them." The digital crowd surges. The physical crowd remains still. At the playground, two mothers whisper about the clip. Mother says, "It's all over the internet. Did you see how he stood up to them?" The other shrugs nervously. Mother replies, "Don't say that too loud. Karen hears everything." The irony burns. The world beyond their fence shouts louder than the people living next door. The family, however, feels the energy shifting. The viral moment has given them more than sympathy. It has given them eyes, attention, a measure of protection. Marcus leans over the kitchen table, scrolling through comments on his phone. Marcus says, "Strangers see us clearer than our neighbors." Althea replies, "Maybe strangers don't have fear in their throats, but attention is not power. The HOA still controls the legal levers. Letters turn into court summons. Deadlines loom." One evening, Marcus holds the latest summons in his hands. His voice trembles for the first time in weeks. Marcus says, "They're really going to take it. They've filed the paperwork." Althea places her hand over his. Althea replies, "Then we fight with paperwork too." She shows him the discovery she unearthed. Tax bills unpaid, records neglected, the HOA's own office left legally vulnerable. The revelation shines like a crack of light through a locked door. Marcus stares at the document, stunned. Marcus says, "They were so busy trying to strip us they forgot to cover themselves." Althea nods, fire in her eyes. Althea replies, "The pen that wounds can also protect. We'll make sure of it." The crowd's silence starts to shift again. Neighbors whisper more openly now, murmuring doubts about the HOA's motives. A retired teacher confides to another, "It's gone too far." A teenager mutters to his friend, "They're the only ones fighting back." But whispers are still whispers. No one dares step into the open. At a block meeting, Karen stands tall, voice sharp. Karen says, "The rules don't bend for anyone. If we let one family slip through, we lose the neighborhood." Some neighbors clap. Others hesitate, their hands half raised, eyes darting toward the family seated silently in the back. The division grows more visible, but fear still tilts the balance toward compliance. Marcus looks around the room, seeing the hesitation in people's eyes. Marcus says, "One day, Your silence will be louder than your applause. The words hang heavy. For the first time, Karen falters. The applause doesn't swell as high as before. As days turn into weeks, the battle sharpens. The HOA files for seizure. The family files their counteraction. Paper against paper. Gavel against gavel. At night, the house glows with the light of laptops and lamps. Marcus reviews filings with a local legal aid volunteer. Althea pores over spreadsheets, piecing together the HOA's negligence. Their children fall asleep to the sound of pages flipping instead of bedtime stories. The fence outside creaks under the wind, a constant reminder of the fight. Finally, the moment arrives. A court date is set. Marcus folds the summons carefully, placing it on the table. Marcus says, "This is it. They'll try to take everything." Althea places the HOA's unpaid tax document beside it. Althea replies, "And we'll take it back." The war of whispers, fines, and silence has reached its turning point. The stage is no longer the fence line. It's a courtroom. And as the family walks into that storm, the silence of the neighborhood feels heavier than ever. But so does the strength of their own resolve. The courthouse looms ahead like a fortress of stone and silence. Its doors, tall and unyielding, stand as barriers between power and justice. On the steps outside, neighbors gather in uneasy clusters. Some hold their phones, ready to record. Others avert their eyes, pretending to be there for other cases. Silence still lingers, but it is shifting, restless. Inside, the air is heavy with the scent of old wood and polished floors. Papers shuffle, shoes echo. The gavel rests on the judge's bench, waiting like a weapon of finality. Marcus straightens his tie with hands that still bear the roughness of labor. Althea squeezes his arm gently. Althea says, "Remember, every letter they sent us, every word they wrote. It's here now, and so are we." He nods, carrying the weight of history into a room built to measure justice, but too often tilted against families like theirs. The HOA members sit opposite them, their expressions smug and certain. Karen leans back in her chair, lips curved, into a faint smile. Karen says softly to her colleagues, "This will be quick." Her voice is sharp enough for Marcus to hear. Marcus doesn't answer. He doesn't need to. The boxes of documents stacked beside him speak louder than he could. The proceedings begin. The HOA's attorney rises first, voice clipped and confident. Attorney says, "This family has failed repeatedly to comply with community regulations. Their violations are numerous, ongoing, and disruptive to the uniformity of the neighborhood. We seek seizure of the property in accordance with the bylaws." The words fall like stones, heavy and rehearsed. The judge nods, expression neutral. The silence of the courtroom thickens. Marcus leans forward, whispering to Althea. Marcus says, "They think this is already won." Althea replies, "Then let's remind them it's not." Their own attorney rises, a younger woman, sharp-eyed, carrying folders packed with evidence. Her voice cuts through the silence. Attorney replies, "What the HOA presents as violations are, in fact, targeted harassment. This family has been fined disproportionately, singled out repeatedly, and subjected to trespass. We have evidence." Murmurs ripple through the courtroom. Karen stiffens. The first box of documents is placed on the table. Papers spill out, each one a violation notice, each one marked with dates, signatures, and patterns too glaring to ignore. Phones lift in the gallery. The crowd, once mute, begins to record. The HOA pushes back, producing their own records, charts, photos, evidence of supposed non-compliance. They display images of fences, of mailboxes, of lawns too long by inches. Karen rises, her voice clear. Karen says, "Rules exist to protect everyone. Without them, we have chaos. This is not personal. It is about standards." Marcus clenches his jaw, standing slowly. Against protocol, against the script of courtroom decorum, he speaks. Marcus says, If it wasn't personal, you wouldn't be here trying to erase us. The judge raises a hand, motioning for order, but the words have already landed. The crowd shifts, a low wave of murmurs swelling. The family's attorney presents the trespass footage. The courtroom watches as HOA agents are seen measuring, photographing, crossing property lines. The voices captured on tape echo through the speakers. Agent on video says, "Non-compliance will result in forfeiture." Marcus on video replies, "Say it again, say it louder." The jury of neighbors, if not in law, then in presence, reacts, gasps, whispers. Some shake their heads in disbelief. For the first time, the silence begins to fracture. Karen leans forward, face tightening. Karen whispers to the attorney, "Dismiss it. Call it irrelevant." But the footage plays on, undeniable. The pen turns backward. The family's attorney introduces the discovery. Unpaid taxes, delinquent filings, negligence not by the family, but by the HOA itself. A document stamped and signed, the ink of carelessness now weaponized against them. The attorney says, "While this HOA claims authority over families, it has failed to meet its own obligations. We present evidence that the HOA's office building is subject to seizure, not this family's land." The room stills. Karen slams her hand on the table. Karen says, "Objection, this is irrelevant." The judge studies the document, brows furrowing. The gavel strikes once. Judge replies, "Overruled. Proceed." Phones rise higher. Every angle captured, every gasp recorded. Marcus feels the shift like a storm breaking. The pen that once slashed, finds into his life, now becomes his sword. He leans close to Althea. Marcus says, "They wanted to sell our land. We'll sell their house." Althea smiles faintly, tears glinting in her eyes. Althea replies, "No, we'll own it." The crowd stirs, a mix of disbelief and awe. The silence that once drowned the family now becomes gasps, whispers, and the faint, undeniable hum of change. Karen's composure fractures. Sweat beads at her temple. She scans the room, realizing that eyes once indifferent are now watching. Her every move, recording every reaction. The HOA's machine, once faceless, begins to crumble in public view. The session pauses for recess. Outside the courtroom, the crowd gathers, buzzing with energy. A neighbor who once avoided eye contact approaches Marcus quietly. Neighbor whispers, "I didn't speak before, but I'm with you now." Marcus studies him, weary but resolute. Marcus says, "Better late than never, but remember, silence made this possible." The man nods, ashamed, retreating into the cluster of onlookers. News vans park outside. Reporters speak into cameras, their words carried far beyond the courthouse steps. The story is no longer local. It is national. As the recess ends and people file back into the courtroom, the atmosphere has changed. The family no longer walks in as defendants. They walk in as challengers. The crowd is no longer an audience. They are witnesses. The judge returns. The gavel strikes. The second half of the showdown is about to begin. And as the silence breaks fully into the roar of witness and record, one truth becomes clear. What began at the fence now threatens to bring down the walls of the very office that tried to erase them. The climax is not over. The collapse has only just begun. The gavel strikes again, pulling the courtroom back into tense silence. The recess is over, but the air feels different. Now, the weight that once pressed down on the family has shifted, tilting toward the HOA board instead. Karen adjusts her blazer, forcing composure back into her expression. Her voice is clipped, sharp, determined to seize control again. Karen says, "This is nothing but a distraction. Their property remains in violation. Their fines remain unpaid, and the rules remain clear." The HOA's attorney echoes her urgency, flipping through papers, thrusting images forward, photographs of fences, lawns, and mailboxes. Attorney says, "This is about uniformity, This is about order. If one family disregards rules, the entire community suffers. But the words sound brittle, cracking under the memory of the footage, under the revelation of unpaid taxes. The family's attorney rises calmly, stacking papers neatly on the table. Attorney replies, "This case is not about order. It is about abuse of power. It is about a board hiding behind policies while ignoring its own. It is about selective enforcement meant to dispossess a family of their rightful home." Her words fall like a hammer. The silence of the crowd breaks into whispers, a storm building just beneath the surface. Marcus watches the HOA members fidget, shifting in their seats. He leans toward Althea. Marcus says, "They're cracking. You can see it." Althea replies, "Keep pushing. Don't let them breathe." The attorney calls the first witness, a former HOA employee who resigned months earlier. Nervous, she takes the stand, eyes darting toward Karen before settling on the family's lawyer. Attorney says, "Tell us why you left the HOA." The witness exhales shakily. Witness replies, "Because I saw how they targeted families. I saw how they went after them harder than anyone else, and I couldn't stay silent anymore." Gasps ripple through the gallery. Phones tilt higher, recording every word. Karen slams, her hand on the table. Karen says, "She's disgruntled. None of this is credible." The judge lifts a brow, unimpressed. The gavel taps once for order, but the damage is already done. The silence has been broken further, pierced by testimony. The family's attorney shifts to the next piece of evidence: financial records. Each document displayed on the screen shows inconsistencies, unexplained expenditures, money funneling from HOA accounts into miscellaneous categories. The crowd murmurs louder now. The HOA's facade of organization crumbles into fragments of corruption. Althea grips Marcus's hand tightly. Althea whispers, "Every paper they used against us led here. Look at them now." Karen's face flushes red. She hisses at her attorney under her breath. Karen says, "Fix this, spin it, do something." But nothing can spin what's already on the record, in ink, under the public's gaze. The climax surges higher when the family's attorney delivers the final strike, a deed transfer. Attorney says, while this HOA sought to seize the family's land, they neglected their own filings. The building they operate from, the very office where they issue these fines, is now in default. This family, through legal purchase, now owns it. The words hang in the air like thunder. For a long moment, no one speaks. The silence is absolute, crushing. Then, like a dam breaking, the crowd erupts, gasps, shouts, applause, disbelief. Phones rise above heads, capturing every second of Karen's stunned expression. Her mouth opens, but no words come. Marcus rises slowly, voice calm but edged with steel. Marcus says, "You tried to sell our history. Now we own your house of rules." The gallery explodes. Reporters rush from the room to send headlines into the world. The HOA board members stare down at the table, avoiding every eye, their power dissolving under the flood of exposure. The judge restores order with a heavy gavel strike, but even his voice carries a different tone now. Judge says, "The court recognizes the evidence presented. The HOA has failed to meet its own obligations, and this family's property will not be seized. In fact, the matter of the HOA's office requires separate proceedings." Karen's voice bursts out, desperate. Karen says, "This can't be happening. They can't." But her words collapse under the roar of the crowd. Althea stands beside Marcus, her voice steady. Althea says, "You thought silence would protect you. Now it condemns you." The symbolism is too sharp to miss. The fence that once stood as division is now meaningless. The silence that once suffocated has been shattered. The pen, the paper, the gavel, Every tool once used against the family has been turned back on those who wielded them. Phones capture every angle as the HOA board files out, faces pale, steps unsteady. Karen lingers, staring at the family with a glare meant to wound, but it carries no weight anymore. Marcus meets her eyes, unflinching. Marcus says, "You thought we'd fold, but we learned from every paper you sent. You wrote your downfall yourself." Karen doesn't reply. She turns and leaves, swallowed by the murmurs and gasps of the crowd. Outside, the courthouse steps are alive with energy. Neighbors who once stood in silence now find their voices. Some cheer openly. Others approach the family hesitantly, shame mixed with respect. A man extends his hand, voice low. Neighbor says, "I should have spoken sooner. I'm sorry." Marcus shakes his head, his words cutting but calm. Marcus replies, "Sorry doesn't erase silence, but maybe now you'll use your voice for more than whispers." The man nods, chastened, retreating, back into the swelling crowd. Reporters swarm. Microphones thrust forward. The family doesn't gloat. They stand tall, shoulders squared, their victory less about humiliation and more about survival, reclamation, history. Althea turns to the cameras. Althea says, "This wasn't just about us. It was about every family who ever had their home stolen by paperwork, by silence, by rules designed to erase them. We didn't just win a house, we reclaimed our voice." The word spread across headlines within hours. Family saves land, buys HOA office. David topples Goliath with paperwork. That night, the family sits around the kitchen table where the war of letters once buried them. The boxes are still there, stacked like towers. But now, instead of feeling like weapons aimed at them, they feel like relics of a battle won. Marcus sifts through one of the letters, holding it in his hands. Marcus says, "Funny, this piece of paper almost took everything from us." Althea replies, "And that piece of paper gave it all back." Their children sit wide-eyed, absorbing every word, learning the meaning of resilience carved into documents and deeds. Outside, the fence creaks once more in the night wind, but this time it doesn't sound like a prison. It sounds like a stage curtain closing at the end of an act. The climax has ended, the machine has collapsed, and now, resolution awaits. The courthouse steps are empty now, the echoes of gasps and shouts still clinging to the stone walls. For the first time in months, the family returns home without the weight of fear pressing their shoulders down. The mailbox sits at the edge of the lawn, silent, no longer spitting threats disguised as letters. The air feels lighter, though scars remain invisible in every board of the fence, every corner of the yard. Marcus unlocks the door, stepping inside with a slowness that feels ceremonial. The kitchen table greets him, still covered in stacks of paper. Althea joins him, running her hands along the piles. Althea says, "They thought this would bury us. Instead, it built our case." Marcus replies, "Every page was a wound, but together they became armor." The children climb into their chairs, pulling envelopes from the stacks like playing cards. They laugh, the tension broken. What once symbolized fear now feels like something conquered, defanged. The war of paper has ended. The next morning, the IR family stands before a different building, the HOA's former office. Its doors, once symbols of control, now belong to them. The locks have been changed. A fresh sign hangs on the door. Property of the family's name. Neighbors gather in hesitant clusters, curiosity pulling them closer. Some cheer lightly, others cross their arms. The same silence that once condemned the family now trembles on the edge of applause. Marcus runs his hand along the cold brick of the office wall. Marcus says, "This was their fortress, now it's ours." Althea steps forward, unlocking the door. Inside, the rooms are lined with filing cabinets, papers stacked neatly, the old weapons of fines and enforcement. She pulls one drawer open, the folders inside still labeled with neighbors' names. Althea whispers, "They ruled this whole street from here." Marcus replies, "Not anymore." The crowd presses closer, uneasy. A man in the back claps hesitantly, then stops when no one joins. A woman clears her throat, then looks down at her shoes. The silence is still alive, but weaker now, its power fractured. A week later, the family makes a choice. They open the office doors not as enforcers, but as hosts. The space once used to threaten is turned into a community hall. Children run through the rooms. Elders sit at long tables sharing coffee and conversation. Where papers once dictated fines, voices now share stories. A neighbor approaches Marcus, wringing his hands nervously. Neighbor says, I stayed quiet. I thought silence would protect me. I was wrong." Marcus studies him, his tone steady but firm. Marcus replies, "Silence always protects the powerful. Remember that." The man nods, shame etching lines into his face. He joins the crowd inside, slowly breaking from silence into presence. The fence at the family's home still stands, but it no longer holds the same meaning. Its boards are scarred, paint chipped, each mark a reminder of battles fought at its edge. One afternoon, Marcus picks up a hammer. The children gather around, watching as he pulls the first board loose. The wood creaks, bending, breaking. The sound is both painful and freeing. A neighbor watches from across the street, curiosity written across her face. Neighbor says, "You're tearing it down?" Marcus replies, "It was never just a fence. It was a wall, and we don't need walls anymore." One by one, the boards come down. Some neighbors join in, handing tools, pulling nails. Others keep their distance, unable to confront their role in keeping the fence standing all these years. By sunset, gaps in the fence open into the street. Children run through freely, their laughter spilling across lawns. The symbol of division collapses into wood scraps piled on the curb. The silence of the neighborhood has shifted. It no longer drowns, but it doesn't fully sing either. Some neighbors applaud openly, voices carrying across the street. Others mutter in bitterness, clinging to the old rules. The divide remains, but it is no longer one-sided. At a block gathering, the change is undeniable. Where whispers once dominated, conversations now carry. A woman steps forward, addressing Marcus and Althea. Neighbor says, "You stood up when none of us did. I see that now." Althea answers, her tone measured. Althea replies, "It shouldn't have taken us almost losing everything for you to see." The woman bows her head, humbled. Others nod, some ashamed, some inspired. The silence has been transformed into a fragile chorus, imperfect but alive. News of the case spreads beyond the neighborhood. Articles are published, documentaries hinted at. Historians write about the moment as part of a long, bitter history. Black families stripped of homes through policy and law, and the rare moments when the cycle was broken. The family reads headlines aloud at the kitchen table. Marcus says, "They called it a paper revolution." Funny. Althea smiles faintly. Althea replies, "Our ancestors fought with blood. We fought with ink. Different battles, same war." Flashbacks drift through Marcus's mind again. His grandfather's hands clutching loan papers that denied him fairness. His uncle's eyes watching bulldozers. He imagines those ancestors looking down, seeing the land still in family hands, the office once used for control now reclaimed. Their victory echoes backward through time, touching every wound in their family's story. But the victory is not only personal. It sparks conversations across towns, cities, forums online. Families write messages of support. Activists cite the case in their speeches. The story becomes a symbol larger than the neighborhood, a reminder that injustice thrives on silence and collapses under exposure. Althea stands before a crowd at a community meeting weeks later, speaking not just as a survivor, but as a voice for many. Althea says, "What happened to us wasn't unique. It's part of a long pattern, but we had proof, we had persistence, and we refused to stay silent. Every one of you carries that same choice. When rules are written against you, will you let silence win?" The room grows quiet, her words hanging heavy. People shift in their seats, confronted by the mirror of complicity. One evening, Marcus returns alone to the old oak tree in their yard. He presses a hand to its rough bark, remembering the gatherings it sheltered, the generations it watched over. The wind rustles through its branches, whispering like voices of the past. Marcus whispers back. Marcus says, "We kept it. We kept all of it. They tried to erase us, and we're still here." The oak doesn't answer, but the leaves tremble, carrying the sentiment skyward. In the end, the family's story circles back to where it began. Paper, fences, silence. All the symbols that once seemed impossible to overcome have been rewritten. The fence is gone. The silence has been broken. The pen, once their enemy, became their weapon. And yet, the story is not tied neatly with a bow. Not every neighbor applauds. Not every wound is healed. Some still look with bitterness, resentment curling in their eyes. The past does not dissolve overnight, but progress rarely does. What matters is that survival turned into resistance, resistance into victory. As the story draws to its close, the final reflection lingers, weaving every symbol back together. The fence that divided is gone, but the memory of its shadow remains. The silence that once condemned has been broken, but the choice to speak must be made again and again. The pen that cut with cruelty can also write with justice. The gavel that threatened to erase can also affirm survival. The crowd, once complicit, has shifted. Some with shame, some with applause. But most importantly, the family's voice now carries louder than the silence that once smothered it. And so the question remains, one that cannot be answered by this story alone, but by everyone who hears it. When the rules are written against you, will you stay silent, or will you claim the story as your own? The choice is left with us. Comment your answer below.